Peter de Montfort of Beaudesert Castle was an English magnate, soldier and diplomat. He is the first person recorded as having presided over Parliament as a parlour, a prolocutor, an office now known as Speaker of the House of Commons. He was one of those elected by the barons to represent them during the constitutional crisis with Henry III in 1258. He was later a leading supporter of Simon de Montfort, 6th Earl of Leicester, against the king. Both he and Simon de Montfort were slain at the Battle of Evesham on 4 August 1265. Peter de Montfort was the son of Thurstan de Montfort by a daughter of William I de Cantilupe of Aston Cantilupe, Warwickshire, steward of the household to King John. Montfort's principal estate was at Beaudesert Castle near Henley in Arden, Warwickshire, said to have been built by an earlier Thurstan de Montfort on land granted by his great-uncle, Henry de Newburgh, Earl of Warwick. In 1141 Thurstan de Montfort had from the Empress Maud a charter for a market to be held at the castle every Sunday. It is thought to have been Peter de Montfort who walled the inner bailey in stone, work said to have been completed in January 1216. After his father's death, Peter de Montfort's wardship was granted by King John to his grandfather, William I de Cantilupe, and during that time Montfort developed a lasting friendship with his uncle, Walter de Cantilupe, Bishop of Worcester, from 1238 to 1266. In 1236 he made a pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela in the company of another of his uncles, William II de Cantilupe. In 1242 he attended Henry III on an expedition to Poitou. At some earlier date, he took part in a prohibited tournament at Cambridge, as a result of which the king took his lands from him. They were restored in 1245. Beaudesert was only 9 miles from Kenilworth, which from 1244 on was the base of Simon de Montfort, 6th Earl of Leicester. According to Carpenter, it was likely this proximity which drew Montfort into the Earls Circle. He attested a number of the Earls' charters, and in the early autumn of 1248 was in his retinue while the Earl was seneschal in Gascony. He had returned to England by 1251, when he was given custody of Horston Castle in Derbyshire, but by 1253 was back in Gascony. Montfort accompanied the king's son, the future Edward I, to Spain when he married Eleanor of Castile in the summer of 1254, and on the 19th of September of that year acted as surety at Bordeaux for the king's debts. For the next 2 years he was sent on diplomatic missions by Henry III. However, his foreign service appears to have ended in 1257, by which time he was a member of the Royal Council, had received an appointment in the Welsh Marches, and was serving as High Sheriff of Staffordshire and Shropshire. In April 1258 he and Simon de Montfort were among the 7 magnates who revolted against Henry III. He and the Earl were also among the 12 magnates who drew up plans for reform, and were on the council of 15 members set up to govern England in the king's name. He presided over a parliament at Oxford in 1258, dubbed the Mad Parliament by the king's supporters, and was thus the earliest recorded presiding officer of the Commons, an office later known as Speaker, but then referred to as parlour or prolocutor. In the autumn of 1259 he was with the king and queen when they travelled to France to arrange a peace with Louis IX. In the same year he was named an executor of Simon de Montfort's will. On the 12th of April 1261, shortly before his death, Pope Alexander IV issued a papal bull which absolved Henry III of the oath he had taken to keep the provisions of Oxford. When the king made this known in June of that year, Peter de Montfort was one of 3 arbitrators elected by the barons to negotiate with the king on the behalf. According to Cockayne, Montfort was now beginning to associate himself definitely indefinitely with the baronial party, and as a result, the Sheriff of Warwickshire was ordered to prevent him from fortifying Beaudesert Castle. He took part with other barons in attacking Worcester, which fell on the 28th of February 1263 after several assaults. A temporary peace between the king and the barons was arranged in July of that year, and Montfort was given charge of Corfe Castle and Sherborne Castle. Simon de Montfort had left England after Henry III's return to power, but was back in the country in April 1263. In March 1264 civil war again broke out, and Peter de Montfort sided with Simon de Montfort against the king. On the 2nd of April 1264 he had a safe conduct to Brackley to meet with Henry III's envoys. However, on the following day he and his two sons, Peter and Robert, were at Northampton Castle when the keeper surrendered it to Simon de Montfort the younger. On the 5th of April the castle was retaken by the king, and Peter de Montfort and his sons were taken prisoner and transported to Windsor. They were released after Simon de Montfort's victory at the Battle of Lewes. During the subsequent dominance of Simon de Montfort, Peter de Montfort became one of a 9-member council forced upon the king in June 1264. Thereafter he played a principal role in the government of the county. On the 11th of September he was appointed one of the envoys who negotiated the reformation of the English government in the presence of Louis IX of France, and a papal legate. On the 16th of November he and his heirs were granted the manor of Garthorpe, Leicestershire. On the 20th of December he was granted custody of Whittington Castle and Hereford Castle. He accompanied Simon de Montfort when the latter journeyed into Wales, and was joint keeper of the royal seal during that time. He was with Simon de Montfort in his final campaign, and was slain with him at the Battle of Evesham on the 4th of August 1265. His two sons, Peter and Robert, who also took part in the battle, were both wounded and taken prisoner. His place of burial is unknown. He was survived by his wife, Alice. His heirs in the male line died out in 1367. Peter de Montfort's arms were bendy of 8, or an azure, although a seal of Peter de Montfort shows only bendy of 6. Marriage and issue. Montfort married Alice Audley, daughter of Henry Audley, by whom he had two sons, Peter and Robert. His eldest son, Peter de Montfort, succeeded him. On the 28th of June 1267 he was pardoned by Henry III for all trespasses at the time of the disturbance in the kingdom, and eventually recovered part of his father's lands. He married Maud de la Mare, daughter of Sir Henry de la Mare of Ashted, Surrey, by whom he had a son, John, and two daughters, Elizabeth and Alice. John de Montfort, Baron Montfort. In 1280 his father granted his marriage to Edward I's wife, Eleanor of Castile. John de Montfort was summoned to Parliament on the 24th of June 1296 by writ directed Ioane de Monteforti, whereby he is held to have become Lord Montfort. Before 28th of March 1287 he married Alice de Laplanche, the daughter of William de Laplanche, by whom he had a son and heir, John de Montfort, 2nd Baron Montfort, who took part in the death of King Edward II's favourite, Piers Gaveston, for which he was eventually pardoned. He was slain at the Battle of Bannockburn, dying unmarried and without issue, and was succeeded by his younger brother, Peter de Montfort, 3rd Baron Montfort, who also died without legitimate male issue, at which time any barony created by writ fell into abeyance among his two sisters, Elizabeth de Montfort, who married William Montague, 2nd Baron Montague, by whom she was the mother of 4 sons and 7 daughters, including William Montague, 1st Earl of Salisbury, Simon Montague, successively Bishop of Worcester and Bishop of Ely, Elizabeth Montague, Prioress of Holywell Priory, and Mauden Isabel Montague, successively Abbesses of Barking Abbey, Alice de Montfort, who married firstly Warren de Lisle, by whom she was the mother of Robert de Lisle, 1st Baron Lisle, and secondly Robert Fitzwalter, 1st Baron Fitzwalter.